I am one of the co-founders of Rolling Regenerative. I don't know if all of you guys know me, so I'm going to do a really quick introduction, but I'm just the MC here, and then we're going to get on to our real presentation. I think that we need to find people that are already doing this and put our resources through them, and that's really what this year is about. We've got 3 amazing groups doing this in New York State. So half of this room is, I would say, tech people and investors. Like, raise your hand, you know who you are. You guys are those people. And then raise your hand if you're the other people, which are the farmers. Hooray. And so meet everyone, please. And we need you guys to work together. And that's what this event is all about. So you're going to hear from 3 amazing groups that have an ask. And to help them scale their amazing work even further. And Tianna's the first one, so if you would come on up.
I wanted to be a farmer after living in Brooklyn for a long time, and started a farm and promptly realized that it was a lot more complicated than just, crop planting and putting seeds in the ground. We started a CSA to go with the farm, which everybody knows that model, but we hedged our bets and made it a multi-farm CSA just in case we failed at our new farm property. And that quickly got really complicated. It succeeded because we were in a poor region without access to markets. It's about 4 hours from here, so it's really hard to get to Green Market. And we started onboarding more and more farms, and we grew like 30 to 60% every year. And then during the pandemic, that really blew up. So pretty soon I'm running a vegetable farm, a food hub, with now 40 farms. And then during the pandemic, we jumped into mutual aid work, and then into land access work, and then into farm to institution work. And soon realized that, maybe we're doing a lot of work and need a little support for that work. So I'm going to walk you through it. When we started farming, I was working at a large production farm, and we started this little thing called the Lucky Dog Food Hub, which was basically, I started coming down to Green Markets with that farm. And because we were launching our little spaceship once a week down here, we let other farms jump on the truck, and we called it a little food hub. But it was really just like a self-organized farm hub. And when that farm transitioned to the younger generation, the younger guys are like, this is a lot of extra work, we don't want to do it. So when I started my own farm, I kind of took over the logistics, and that became the 607 CSA. And then recently we just turned it into a nonprofit, and now it's called the Catskills Agrarian Alliance. So the history. So we've been doing this for about a decade, although we're a brand new nonprofit. Because I was focusing on all these logistics, I took on another farm partner who had been working with us. Her name is Amanda Wong, and she is amazing. And she connected with a bunch of self-organized groups, mostly in Bushwick, and those groups started just supporting themselves through fundraising efforts, through hustling in every possible way, and then have become part of our team basically. And they come up and we do fundraising parties at our farm. They now are decision makers. We just had an amazing retreat with 30 different collectives where we were talking about how we're going to change this mutual aid work, or this food relief work, into actual mutual aid work and community organizing. We're forming a advisory board with these people to help us in our decision making about what to plant so that we are growing culturally appropriate foods. We're trying to innovate on different ways to get food to these people so that it's not just like donative schlepping of food, but a participatory system. We are also doing a big land access project. So throughout all of this, as a farmer, and as many of you know, it's really hard to get access to land. If you're especially a young person with a lot of student loan debt, land is expensive. Land is sold at market price, not at agricultural price. And even if you come in, even if you find your funding, somebody will come in with a cash bid, a couple thousand over, and you're going to lose your option. So I've been friends with Agrarian Trust since the beginning, since the inception, working with those guys, friends with American Farmland Trust. These are 2 national organizations that don't currently work together, but because I knew both of them, I thought maybe why not have a pilot project where we get American Farmland Trust to buy a property, we create the local management board, which is the part that's often missing in these organizations, and then fundraise to put it into this national trust. And so we have that first project pending right now. It's a 300-acre farm in Delaware County. Hopefully we can do some of the agroforestry work that the other speakers will be speaking to soon on that property. But, you know, so that's one of the projects that's in place. We also just do land linking. You know, like I've been there for 15 years. I know the aging farmers. Everybody's at the age now where they've been holding on as long as they can, and now their medical debt is at a point where they need to sell. So I'm like finding the people to buy those properties as soon as I can. So that's one area that really needs a lot of support. And then this year, you know, I've been in the winter as a farmer, you're kind of poor and you need a job. So I've been working for nonprofits up there, and everybody always talks about farm to institution work, but nobody ever seems to manage to do it because the barriers to entry are hard. The bids are complicated and annoying. The capacity at the schools is really limited because there's no processing. And so we just hired someone to just problem solve. And that person managed to get us contracts for $30,000 worth of food this year going to our local schools. Plus, we did a New York State grant so that we're replacing all the tomato sauce for next year in 12 different districts from locally grown tomato sauce that we're processing with the local college. So there's all sorts of amazing work that can be done if you just dedicate time and resources to it. So that's a big win for us. And then, you know, our governance is that it's not just, it was the Tianna show for a long time, but that's not sustainable. And so now we have a board of directors, we have the Farmer Advisory Board, the Mutual Aid Advisory Board, a really strong team of farmers and co-workers. And hopefully when I retire to my agroforestry farm, this work will continue. So that's the overview. Here's just like an overview of the stuff that we've done that I just talked about, but if you want to read it, I can share this deck later. Okay, 5-minute warning. We'll just zip through stuff. We were doing great, but we were self-exploiting and exploiting our friends. You know, $100 day rate for the laborers, $2 an hour for me, and we need a living wage, right? So that's why we are committed to these values: living wage, reciprocal stewardship of land, inclusion and empowerment. My farm partner, Walter, and I are white, but everybody else we work with is not, so they're the decision makers, and that's really exciting. These are all the groups we're working with. That's upstate. We also do upstate pantries because it's a really red area where we are, and it's important to reach out to that community too, to like make change. This is some of the pictures of what we're doing just to prove that we exist. This is the aggregation. That's PAC. That's the next generation of farmers right there. That's Amanda Wong, my farm partner, and Francis Yu, who will hopefully replace me at some point. That's the fridge, you know, one of the free fridges we're working with. That's our farm crew this year. This is a tomato project on the right, and Amanda being a badass on the left. This is one of our distributions in the city, and we're also doing chickens. We went into livestock this year, and organic pastured livestock too. That's the farm. It's a really nice place. You guys should all visit. And then this is just the climate relevant stuff, right? All of the farms that we're working with there's 40 farms. Most of them organic. They're all small family farms. We're in a region that hasn't been turned into a wasteland of GMO because it kind of sucks for farming. So it's like rocky soil, you know, weird places. And so these farms have been untouched for a really long time, and there's some holdout farms and new farms coming up. And we're really lucky to be able to aggregate instead of scaling, you know. And it's a model that I think a bunch of other regions could adopt if there was support for that. That was just to say that the UN came up to visit. They're like, there's some potential here, but it needs resources. And I thought, yeah, totally. And, you know, there we are. We're all doing the good work. We're building soils. We're promoting cover cropping. But it's all on we're taking all the risk. No one's paying us for this. There's not even any, what is it called when you go to the doctor? Insurance. There's no crop insurance, right, for small organic farms. It's all for soy and wheat and hay. when there's a climate disaster, there's no relief for that. Like the first farm I was on during Irene just got devastated during the flood, and we're an organic farm and we just had to eat it, you know. So all of the farmers are doing this work because we believe in it, not because we're being supported in it. And I just think that that's a kind of crazy system. So at any rate, so we are also, obviously, I said, working with a bunch of people. And we just really believe that this project that we're doing can be replicated. But as it stands, it's sort of relationship-based. It's based on me. It's based on my connection in the Navy Yard, where we have one of their food hubs that goes to the city. It's based on all of these things that require funding otherwise, you know. And so if I'm not here to make it all happen, we need support somehow. And so we're asking for a lot of money because there's 17 people on our team and everybody's dedicated to a certain part of the project. And it's not sexy to pay people's wages, right? It's really sexy to buy electric trucks, to do brick and mortar builds, to do something that you can sell later if it all fails, right? But none of this would work without the people involved, and we're just trying to support the people. So that's our ask. You know, you can contribute at any level. All sorts of wonderful things can happen with any level of contribution. And that's it.
My slide deck up? Yeah. All right. Breadtree. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about agroforestry. Not going to get into the detail Mark's going to get into in a second, but just want to kind of give some context. Oh, not too much detail? Okay. Just want to give some context on what agroforestry is. So agroforestry is the intentional integration of trees into agricultural systems. This is different than, for example, an orchard, where you might just be growing almonds, and that might be the only plant growing in that acre. Right? So agroforestry is, for example, silvopasture, where we're integrating trees into a pasture system. So maybe growing stone fruit and raising sheep for lamb, or in our case, beef cattle and chestnuts in the Northeast. Or, for example, alley cropping. These are kind of the two practices we're particularly interested in. There are other agroforestry operations. Alley cropping, generally the integration of annuals in alternating rows with tree crops, or even kind of shorter cycle perennials like cane fruit or shrub fruit. And so you're creating multiple layers, and you're, generally speaking, increasing the photosynthetic activity on that piece of land. You're adding life to the system. You're adding resilience to that system. And as Project Drawdown, the most comprehensive set of solutions that humans have ever created to reverse climate change, points out, agroforestry is a number of the solutions in the top 20 most potent solutions to reversing climate change. So we've got silvopasture, we've got tree intercropping, we've got perennial staple crops, meaning staple pieces of your diet that grow on trees, right? And this is just to paint a picture, this isn't like some niche hippie thing. The Obama administration in 2016, when they released the mid-century decarbonization report, highlighted agroforestry as one of the most important land use change strategies. 50 million acres of suitability minimum, both for climate change adaptation, making farms more resilient, making communities more resilient, and for climate change mitigation, actually effectively reducing the concentration of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere. And more recently, the IPCC, this is very small. We will send out a deck following tonight so that people can actually read this. Right here, what this is saying is that agriculture, forestry, and land use is just as potent as renewables as the potential for reducing emissions, right? And this is, the point here is not to say, so only plant trees. This is a all of the above conversation. So anyone in here who's working more on the tech side of climate change, I am not saying stop doing what you're doing, and investors, please do not stop investing in them. But really importantly, Climate Tech VC highlighted in a report in April 2022, looking at the past 2 years of climate investment. This bar is ecosystem restoration's potential for contributing to net emission reduction. This bar is how it compares in venture capital funding. So it's an order of magnitude less, 2 orders of magnitude in some situations, and it is one of the most potent solutions for reversing climate change. So there is some opportunity out there. And even more embarrassing than that, the US government beat you to the punch. So a month ago, the USDA released grant funding through the Climate Commodities Block Grants, $65 million through the Nature Conservancy to agroforestry, I think another $45 million through Organic Valley, who I think was $30 million. So almost $100 million to agroforestry from the United States government, who does not move all that fast. So, a question we wanted to pose that maybe we'll get to over dinner, I do not have enough time to answer it right now, is why is there a dearth of agroforestry? Specifically, why is there a dearth of agroforestry in temperate climates like in the United States? I have a lot of hypotheses. They're linked to colonialism and short-sightedness and sunk cost fallacy. I'm happy to get drunk and talk about that another night. I have to drive home tonight. So why chestnuts? I'm going to talk specifically about chestnuts. I think the CrannMor folks are going to talk a little bit more about hazelnuts. Important to note, I love that this isn't a pitch event in the sense that we're competing against each other. I talked to some of the CrannMor folks ahead of this dinner. I talked to Tianna. It's an honor to get to present with them, and we're all in it together. So I'm just focusing on chestnuts, but I would love it if there were more hazelnuts. Why chestnuts? Why is our name Breadtree? Chestnuts have been a perennial staple crop across temperate and Mediterranean climate zones throughout the planet for millennia. So Korea, Japan, China, Turkey, Greece, France, Portugal, Spain. Breadtree was the nickname of this tree. It is a staple crop. It has sustained peasant communities in warfare and imperialism since before any of us knew what agriculture was. Specifically, it's a staple crop that is nutritionally similar to things like wheat and sweet potato and rice. It's gluten-free. So in some senses, in France, for example, it's milled into a flour. So we're talking about a gluten-free flour that grows on trees, that sequesters carbon, that tastes really good. Seems like a worthwhile opportunity exploring, right? So then from a commercial standpoint, what's the opportunity here? So most of you have probably never eaten chestnuts on any consistent basis, right? So 4,000 acres of production in the U.S. Yeah, most, not you, Mark. 4,000 acres of production in the U.S. That is essentially nothing. Roughly 80 million acres of corn, maybe 70 million acres of wheat or soy, right? So 4,000 is nothing. 90% of the chestnuts that we eat in the U.S. today are imported. So we already have a 10x opportunity to produce chestnuts here. It is moisture and sugar dense, so it's susceptible to mold and drying out in importation. So right now today, we have a 10x opportunity to grow chestnuts in the US that will be higher quality nuts than are consumed in Chinatown right now. That's just with current consumption. We consume 0.05 pounds per capita in the US. In China, they consume 2 pounds per capita annually. That's a 40x opportunity on increasing consumption here in the US. 10 times 40 is 400. There's a 400x market opportunity for increasing chestnut production here in the United States. The market today globally is about $5.6 billion. It's expected, per a report from the Savannah Institute, to increase to $8.3 billion by 2025. This is not a niche crop. We're just behind the curve. In terms of sales, the larger sellers I know in the U.S. Generally do direct to customer. They list on their website, sell out within a week before they've even harvested. They sell 50-pound bags of nuts at $7.50 to $9.50 a pound. So they're selling wholesale quantities at retail prices and selling out in a week. I've already been cold called by different international grocery stores in the Northeast asking if they can buy over 1,000 pounds from me. Today they can't. In 2 years they can. So there's already demand that is unmet here in the Northeast. 5-minute warning. All right, we're going to move fast. So Breadtree at a glance. 4 years ago, I found a farmer who thought this crazy kid might be onto something. I will give you a 30-year lease because my family's been here for 130 years, and I've never met someone who wanted to commit for multiple decades. He gave me 8 acres on a revenue share lease, which meant I had no upfront land costs. That's the only way I could get trees in the ground. So I haven't paid a cent for land yet. He'll get 10%. I will never give that deal again. The land will end up more expensive than if I had bought it, but I didn't have the money. 8 acres became 20 because they loved it so much. Noah came on board as an investor, which allowed us to scale up. We planted 25 acres this spring. We're doing another 25 this fall. We're planning to do about 70 more next year. We'll be at 150 acres of chestnut agroforestry by the end of 2023. 2019, this is conventional cornfield, me and my parents digging holes. This is 2022. We've now had a few more people than just me and my parents. 2022, these are 17-foot trees. Almost every tree planted in 2019 is yielding. Another orchard I planted that's a year older, we're getting more than a pound a tree already. Here's the beef cattle roaming through there. This is where we planted this year, 25 acres. This is a conversion of another steep cornfield and a gravel quarry that we're basically restoring. Comes with about 55 acres of forest and wetland that we're actively managing for ecosystem health. We've had over 100 people participate in this project. This is a part of our vision. It's getting hands dirty and giving them profit share equity in each project. We believe that experiential capital and financial capital are two major barriers to agroforestry adoption for young farmers, and we're trying to fix both of those through our operations. So when we purchase land, it's 7,000 to 10,000 acres of investment before we get to break even. When we lease land, it's 3,000 to 5,000 acres. And then we're also starting to roll out service relationships. We'll plant our first service relationship next year, which will be profitable from day one. So buying, leasing, and then service. What this basically looks like is we're profitable by between year 8 and 10, depending on the relationship. And we'll share a deck with a lot more detail if anyone wants to review that. We've used a proprietary GIS analysis that I created with Terragenesis International to map out chestnut suitability at a watershed scale. We did this for the Connecticut River watershed, which is about 2 million acres. We've now done it for Rensselaer and Washington counties in New York. What we found is 150,000 acres of suitability in those two counties. We then sent a letter to the 150 largest landowners covering 100,000 acres in Rensselaer and Washington County, telling them we're ready to plant chestnuts if they are. So, just wrapping up, Will, we good? Okay. 2022, 2023 raise to so we are cash flow. We're in a good position. Noah has been a very generous investor and a wonderful partner that's kept us in a good position cash flow wise. But we want to grow this fast and we want to create more opportunities for people who want to plant trees. So that's why we're raising. We're about to close on our next 120 acres in the next month. So we are offering a private loan program. Payback will be 10% compounding APY. We'll start paying. Generally, the goal is to start paying by year 5. We're going to make a clause in there that we have to pay starting at year 7 at a minimum. We'll be paid off by year 8, and the loans will be backed by Breadtree's farmland holdings. So it will be securitized by farmland, basically the safest investment on the planet. And for every 8,500 invested, Breadtree will purchase and operationalize 1 acre of chestnut silvopasture and conserve 1 acre of forest. That's generally how the purchases go. For every cleared acre, there's a forest acre. And in doing so, roughly speaking, we'll secure a lifetime stocking potential of 700 tons of CO2 for each $8,500 invested, and by 8 years, you'll get $17,000 back. So that's the raise. Much more detail available. We'll be planting November 7th through 16th. Anyone who wants to come out, we pay on a sliding scale. We want to get more people involved. Look forward to seeing you there.
What on earth would motivate a 24-year-old kid with $35,000, $40,000 worth of college debt? What would motivate him to move into the middle of corn country and convert a cornfield into a perennial ecosystem and farm it all along the way? Well, like Will, I had a little bit of a history of activism before I kind of changed my tune. If this pointer works at all, I grew up kind of like in the early 70s. My environmental awareness kicked in when there was the oil-producing, exporting countries embargoed fossil fuels come into the country. There were gas lines miles long. As a 12-year-old pushing your mother's car while she's, your little brother is throwing Cheerios all over the place, and you have to push a car a half a mile in a line because it ran out of gas. You think about this human species has to change how we operate because this fossil fuel thing isn't working for me as a 12-year-old in the back of a car. It was also when tax policy changed and the industrial manufacturing base of the USA went overseas for cheaper labor and weaker environmental regulations. This, you can't really see it, but these are some factory buildings. I lived in this apartment right over here. My dad was a factory worker. This river right here, if you look at it, this red river, that's the Nashua River in central Massachusetts. The big game when we'd get in the cars, guess what color the river is today? The Vietnam War was going on. Martin Luther King had been assassinated. The National Guard was in the street shooting college students and killing them, okay? We had to change. I had to change, and I couldn't wait. I couldn't get a good education and a good job and think that that's going to cure everything. Get me out of here. So at that time, I had two different really significant things happen. One is I realized that I'm not going to get out of here with the education and the job, so I'm going to get into real estate investing. And I took on as a mentor these two different guys. One of them was a non-selling flipper. He would buy a residential property, he would rehab it, rent it out, and then have somebody else manage it, and then borrow against it to buy the next one. And the first rule, of course, is location, location, location in real estate. The second one is never, 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 never sell real estate. That was his motto. I would get a finder's fee if he closed on a deal that I found. And then the second one is I discovered AI for the first time. Now, I didn't discover it and invented it, but it's when I encountered it for the first time. And what I mean by AI is actual intelligence. The actual intelligence, when the factory buildings collapsed, nature took over. When the apartment buildings were abandoned, nature took over. If you weren't driving on the sidewalk anymore, the grass comes in, then the raspberries come in, then the trees come in. The ditch on the side of the road, they hit it with salt, they hit it with herbicide, they hit it with mowers, and it keeps coming back. It's like, this is amazingly brilliant. It's such a powerful actual intelligence that 65 million years ago, once upon a time, all of the people were lizards, and we walked around going, "Arr." This big rock falls out of the sky, kaboom! And an 8,000 degree wall of flame goes around the planet. The volcanoes erupt all over the place, tsunamis. 65% of life on Earth was obliterated, gone. And this is what came out of it. The most amazingly beautiful, rich, abundant planet full of biodiversity. The actual intelligence of natural systems kicked in and took over. Well, you know, some people get offended that I tell this story. It's just a myth, this dinosaur thing, that's not true anyways. Well, okay, let's get a little bit more recent. 1980, when I was a junior in high school, there was this mountain out by my cousin's house that just blew up. Beautiful, there's a wilderness area, national park, all that kind of stuff. And it obliterated hundreds, if not thousands of square miles of planet. Life destroyed, kaboom. The scientists said it would take, decades and generations for it to regenerate. Well, within 4 years, it started to regenerate. And what's happening to my thing?
He's changing the contrast to try and make it so you can see.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So the above picture was like 2 or 3 years after the Mount St. Helens eruption. And what happens in any kind of ecological disaster, happened with the dinosaurs, happens with Mount St. Helens, is there are ecological refuges, refugia, where somehow, for some reason, stuff survived, and a diversity of stuff survived. And then if it survived with no inputs, no fertilizer, pesticide, herbicide, fungicide, compost teas, sprays, irrigation, and then it reproduced, its offspring were more than likely to survive that place as well. And that's how the whole planet was recolonized, or in this case, Mount St. Helens. That's how that whole place was colonized. The picture down below was only 15 years later. It's a young forest starting. Who planted it? Who did cover crops for 10 years? Nobody did anything to this. It does it all by itself. And guess what it even did? It made its own soil. Now, if we're farming in such a way that we have to actually build the soil and rebuild the soil and make compost, we're doing it wrong. Nature makes soil all by itself. So if we're farming right, we're making soil just by farming. That's 30 years later. That's actual intelligence. This is the actual intelligence of natural plant communities. Well, what if we take a real severe thing? We're in a big crisis here on planet Earth. I don't know if you believe that or not. I kind of think we are. This is Hiroshima. In both Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there are the memorial trees. These are the trees that remember. They were nuked. These trees right there that are green, they were 1/2 a mile away from ground zero when the atomic bomb went off. They sprouted back from the roots. It's still alive. Now, what's more sustainable? That or a broccoli patch for somebody who's certified regenerative? I think that is. Well, so all of that led me to go to Unity College in Maine, where I studied ecology, these books on the right. At that time, I encountered the Permaculture Designer's Manual. Bill Mollison basically said, hey, everybody, let's solve humanity's problems by designing habitats for everybody. By design, it's like, oh, that's kind of cool. Let's design a new kind of farm. And in my mind, let's mimic nature. So let's design a natural ecosystem. And if it can take care of itself just like nature does, it's pretty hands-off. It's pretty easy, pretty low cost to maintain. Not too easy to see, but Tree Crops by J. Russell Smith was where I first heard about the term agroforestry, combining woody plants, trees, and shrubs with agricultural production on the same piece of ground. And between Tree Crops and the Permaculture Designer's Manual is like, that's it. It did it to me. Well, now the real estate investor part of me says, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to talk about it. There were no blogs back then. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to blog about it. I'm not going to, try to raise awareness. I'm going to do it. So I bought a clear cut with credit cards. I bought the clear cut. I rehabbed it, and I'm trying to figure out how do I plant an ecosystem that produces food. So first of all, you go do the research. What are the natural plant community types that belong right here? What are the species in there that I can eat? What are the foods, the fuels, the medicines, the fibers? Plant it, and then harvest it for sale. So now the ecological restoration is paid for by the agriculture. The real estate was my own real estate investment. This is the kind of the little twist that I did as a 20-some-year-old kid. If I look at the real estate as the investment, the farming is like the tenant that moves in and takes care of everything to pay their rent. That's what the farming does in my way of doing things. So what I did, we bought this cornfield. After doing a few clear cuts, you buy this one, you build a recreational cabin, you plant a bunch of trees, you get it reappraised, you borrow some more money, you buy the next one, you do the same thing, you get it reappraised, you buy the next one, you pay off the first one, and you leave a wake of real estate behind you that's all paid for, free and clear. It worked pretty good. It's taken 30 years, but it's worked pretty good. And so down at the bottom is what happened. That's 15 years later after a cornfield, and it paid its own way. One of the things that's really significant with agroforestry is the land equivalent ratio. A lot of people say that, oh, you're not going to get the yields, you're going organic, you're low input, blah, 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 blah. Say, well, yeah, okay. Here's the example with the land equivalent ratio for agroforesters. If you're going to grow a field of corn, an acre of corn, you're going to get 100% corn. That's one. So that's what you're going to get, 100% corn. Well, what if I take 20% of that ground and put these rows of trees in? Now I only have 80% corn. Shoot, I've got lower yields. So I'm going to get lower yields, period. It's okay. I can get lower yields and still get more yields. How does that make sense? Well, now on the 20% that's left, I'm going to plant rows of walnuts. And because the rows between walnut trees is so wide, I can put in extra walnuts. I can actually put in a 50% of a full stand of walnuts on only 20% of the ground because I got such wide rows in between it. So I get 80% of a corn crop plus 50% of a walnut crop. 80%, 50% is 1.3. I just made 1.3 times the total site yield by getting lower yields of both elements. Ecologists have shown over and over and over again that it's the number of species per acre that determines the total site yield. If you have one species, you're only going to get whatever your one yield is. If you have 1,000 species per acre, you're going to get way more than even if you had 100 species per acre. Now, the trick as a farmer is how many of those can you manage and get enough scale and volume to sell it. So that's really critical for agroforesters. Oh man, is there any possible way to get these darker? Because this is a successional, now it's shut off. Can you, I can't see it. All right, as long as you can see it. So this is in the early years, and if you look, it's all right, because the pointer doesn't work well either. If they say it's good, is it good? You guys see it all right? All right. So if you notice here, this is an alley. This is alley cropping. You got an alley and then a row of trees and an alley and a row of trees. The pattern is such that any rain that falls on the property is spread from high in the valleys out to the ridge where it then goes across in a sheet. And so as time goes on, a couple years go by, now all of a sudden we've got our alley with our crop. There's our row of trees. And in the alley there, I put asparagus, a perennial crop asparagus. So with an agroforestry system, especially if you're doing produce, you can cash flow and actually have a positive cash flow on that property year one. You know, you grow radishes, you got a positive cash flow in 6 weeks. And if you just do all your different enterprise budgets on produce wholesale, selling wholesale to the rotten guys downstairs that just put it into the grocery store, you can still make $3 to $6 grand an acre. That's incredible. And if you're going wholesale, you only have to grow a few items instead of 1,000 different items, so your costs go way down. It's super simple to manage. So what happens is my real estate is what's buying the land, and that's where I'm making my money, is the gain on the value of the real estate over the time. The farming pays its own way and pays for the trees and pays to take care of the trees. Now the agriculture, the farming, this is zucchini. Oh, that was zucchini there. There's the asparagus. By taking care of the asparagus, I'm taking care of the trees. Did you hear me mention at all cash flow from the trees yet? Because we don't need it yet. It'll show up later, and then it's a bonus. It's a bonus. The whole enterprise budget is based on a real estate investment first, and then you do the short-term cash flows from real easy, well-known things such as like grazing cattle, raising chickens, raising produce, all for wholesale markets. So what happens after 15, 20 years, you now have a rich, diverse ecosystem. Does anything there look like an orchard? Not really. We're growing natural systems, and we manage it more like a natural system. And so we have, there's my piggies, and chestnuts, and hazelnuts, and elderberries. This is one of our cultivars of hazelnuts called Rosie. We have chickens and turkeys. And see this row right here? There's apples, walnuts, chestnuts, hazelnuts, grapes, all growing in the same place. Then other people say, oh, with that much competition, you'll never get the yields. Well, don't tell that tree you won't get the yields. And then you think about cost of maintaining, and let's use apples as an example. If you have an apple orchard, you plant only apples and just grass underneath. When you take a plant out of its ecological context, nature took care of pest control, disease control, weed control. It took care of fertility, all of that. You take that plant out of context, you are now responsible for fertility, pest control, disease control, and so on and so on. Those are all expenses. So if we have them now in mixed, diverse systems, we have natural pest control because we have enough pests to feed the predators. Because if you keep killing your pests, whether you kill it with organic or chemical sprays, you're not allowing enough pests to feed your predators, and you don't get a balance. So here, if I have this apple tree here, and I spray nothing, period. I've been certified organic for 26 years, and I have sprayed nothing, period, ever. I only pick the perfect stuff. Well, what if it's not perfect? Who gets it? These guys. Happy as can be, go through the apple orchard, throw the apples on the ground that have worms in it. The pigs come through and turn it into bacon. I'm happy. And so let's go turn now to hazelnuts, because I'm actually here. I'm one of the principals of CrannMor. I'm here to talk a little bit about hazelnuts. Now, nature, most of you guys have seen oak trees when all of a sudden there's acorns all over the ground, 10 zillion acorns on the ground. What happens in nature is these plants produce a ton of seed, lots and lots and lots of seeds. Out of oaks, it's something like 300,000 seeds to make one mature oak tree. So if we go out and we plant oak trees 50 foot on center, what if we had the wrong oak tree for the place? It gets sick, it dies, now we have to spray it, we got to call the radio show, oh, we need to take care of my oak tree, there's something wrong with it. Nature planted 10 zillion trees, we're going to plant 10 zillion trees. They're too close together, they're going to be crowded. Well, then we get to remove the trees, inoculate them with mushrooms, and we have another revenue stream. So we're going to mimic nature by planting way too many, And then we're going to also mimic nature by letting some of them die, because if they die, I'm not interested. If they catch a disease, I'm not interested in them. I want the healthy ones. I want the ones that grow fast and produce a lot. Then we save the seed from the ones that produce young, that produce a lot, and are pest and disease free and cold hardy. And that's our whole breeding process. It's called mass selection. And so these nuts right here, out of the top 10 hazelnut cultivars grown east of Oregon, 4 of them, I think, were university selections that they did. You get a pollen grain with a paintbrush, you put it on a flower, you put a bag on it, and then you pray for 10 years. And the rest of these were discovered in other people's plantings. That's the top 10. Well, Rosie, my cultivar right there, it's the 7th heaviest yielding hazelnut in the upper Midwest. It's the 2nd largest hazelnut, and it has the highest kernel to shell ratio, meaning it's the biggest kernel with the thinnest shell of any hazelnut in North America, period, and it survives 50 below zero. 50 below zero. But what they don't like to show, they don't like to show the fact that, well, guess what? The next like 10 down are all from our breeding program. They want to show the top 10 because, look, see, this is the university. They have a few select plants that produce high yields if you mulch them, if you spray them with fungicides, if you spray them, use this particular fertilizer regime, you have this kind of irrigation, and then, oh, gee, they still don't yield enough to be profitable. Well, you know why? Because you're spending too much money doing stupid stuff to plants that don't need it. So these are all part of a population. We breed for population fitness that the overall population can handle no matter what throws at it. And the word regenerative, in the ecological sense, means the ability of an organism, a community, or an ecosystem to survive where it is, with the conditions the way they are, and then to reproduce itself and expand its range, even in whatever the disturbance regime is there, whether it's fire, earthquake, volcano, floods, etc. So if you can plant your crops, and they will survive no matter what nature throws at it where you are, and then they reproduce and keep moving on, that's regenerative according to the ecological definition. And that's the one I stand by, and that's the one that the forest ag seedlings live by. Out of those populations, we do pull out winners like Rosie, and we propagate those for sale as cultivars. We now have 50 individual cultivars that equal or beat all of the top 10 university-bred 1 pollen grain at a time cultivars. But that's not what I was here to pitch. And so part of what the verification of that, this is from University of Wisconsin. The dotted lines are all the general population of what the growers east of Oregon are using for their hazelnuts. And because we keep selecting the better ones every single year, and we replant with the better genetics, the diameter of our nuts has increased 4 millimeters in the past 10 years. Now, if you're talking about the volume of a sphere, which is the nut, that's triple. We're tripled the volume of that. Well, now what's just recently happened, and it'll take a while before we get official university results, is the fact that we've done more selections, and the forest ag hazelnuts have no plants. The parent plants from the forest ag hazelnuts, none of the plants produce a nut smaller than the average of all those. And so within 5 years, we expect to see a 35% jump in the diameter of all of the nuts in the whole population as a whole. We can't do that small scale. You can't do that with 5 plants in your backyard. It takes mass selection. That's a large number of plants from which to choose from. You guys ever play Yahtzee? You take 5 dice, or you get 5 of a kind. Yahtzee! Now, if I give you 3 dice, and I ask you to roll a Yahtzee, can you do it? You can never roll a Yahtzee with 3 dice. So these very wide spaces, a few plants of special ones, you'll never roll that Yahtzee. We're looking for the magic plants, and we find it by rolling the dice. So, New Forest Farm. You saw some of the motivations why I did it, and some of the tricks of how I did it. I'm now working with CrannMor. Well, why? Because the problems that I showed way back in slide number 2 are even worse today. I think they're even worse today. we'd have no idea the trouble that's coming down the pike. And if we don't do something now to change things, it's game over. And I'm not interested in that, because when things get really weird and squirrely, people get mean, and I don't like that. So let's combine with others. This is some of the CrannMor projects. Let's plant like lots of chestnuts. Where did you go? Like thousands of acres, tens of thousands of acres. These are all CrannMor projects in upstate New York. And now the closing slide I want to put on it right here. Bill Mollison, the founder of permaculture, basically said that although the problems that the world face are increasingly complex, the answers still remain really, really simple. Really, really simple. AI is the answer. Actual intelligence. Nature will be able to roll through this whether we're here or not. I kind of like people. So let's kind of have us around. And if we want to be around, we are now responsible for planting our own habitat. And some of you got this, a little table favor. We were told that there were 60 people coming here, something like 90 RSVPs. Those of you who got this, in here, there are 3 hybrid chestnut seeds. Now these are complex hybrids of American chestnut, Chinese chestnut, Seguin chestnut, European chestnut, all scrambled together in mass selection. The parents of these seeds have survived 50 below zero. So these are super cold hardy chestnuts. They'll go where these gigantic Chinese chestnuts can't go. It's too cold. That tree right there, this happens to be El Castaño de Centocavalli. It's one of the 100 oldest living organisms on the face of the planet. It's on the eastern flank of Mount Etna, about 5 miles from the active cone. It goes through about 60 to 70 earthquakes a day. It's been burned to the ground like several times. It's pushing 4,000 years old. That's what I call sustainable agriculture. Guess what's growing in the understory and around behind over here? How about hazelnuts? They grow together. They're in the same plant community type. One of the biggest plant community types in upstate New York is associated with the oak, the chestnut, and the beech. And it includes plum, and cherry, and hazelnut, and apple, and raspberries, and grapes, and mushrooms, and animals, and grasses. If that doesn't sound like an incredibly sustainable food system, what is? So what this really is, those of you who have it, do you have one of these? Does anyone not have one? Because if you're right near me, I was going to give you this. All right. This actually is what I call a revealer. This right here has the ability to change the future. It's going to take how much carbon out of the atmosphere for how many thousands of years. It's going to build the soil around it. It's going to produce tens, if not hundreds of pounds of healthy, nutritious food every single year without you really doing anything to it. The revealer part of this is, this tells who you are. If you take this and you throw it in the dumpster, we know who you are. If you take this home and you ponder it and you start to get all worried and concerned, oh shit, what I got to do something, well, we know who you are. If you take this home, if you do nothing else, you don't even have to take it home. Find a piece of dirt somewhere, not on a roof, kick a hole in the ground, drop it in, and step on it. You've changed the world for real, forever. If you want to have a little bit more information on how to plant these, go right to that little link right there. But why I did this is I wanted to say to each and every one of us here, all of us around this table, we have all of the resources in our hand to change the world in a massive way, like never before. But we actually have to do this. We actually have to do this. You guys already know I'm all in, and I'm just asking you to at least come close. Come close. So thank you very much for tolerating me.
I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so thankful you all took your time to come and join us and have this conversation. I want to say thank you to Will and Mike and Rolling Regenerative for actually putting this event together in this spectacular spot. Appreciate it. And just a quick raise of hands from some of the people we brought with us who've been helping us out over the last few years. Johan, get your hand up there. So we have some people sprinkled in and around and I want to thank you all for helping us. And then I actually want to take a chance to thank Mark Shepard, my partner and who's been my inspiration for this. He had a crazy idea and just went and did it. And he blazed a trail that we are trying to follow. And he has put out this vision to the world that essentially what we are all trying to do is put a framework around it, bring in more people, bring in more skill sets, and bring in more resources so we can actually take action, get the roots in the ground, and implement some of these nature-based solutions that Russell was talking about being identified. That's our goal. That's our mission. And I'm excited to be in a room with people looking to talk about it. So I'm going to go over a few things real quick. Brief introduction. My name's Kevin Maher, CEO of CrannMor Advisors. I used to work Lower Manhattan on the floor of the Commodities Exchange as a floor trader in a different life. When my daughter was born, she developed a very rare food intolerance. And it led me down a rabbit hole of food and nutrition. How can I provide for her health and sustenance with a very limited diet? And at the same time, I was looking into climate, resource, biodiversity, all sorts of ecological issues. And lo and behold, as I dove down into solutions for my daughter and her health, I found solutions for ecosystem health and other issues in the same hole. We can reimagine how we grow our food and manage our land and actually implement solutions for a lot of the big issues that are facing us. So a quick walk through here. I'm going to run through our recent farm conversion. What are the health benefits coming from what we did on that farm? What are the potential climate benefits? You know, what's the framework and business model that we're trying to put around it to bring more people in and get this done? And then, you know, how big can we do this here in New York State? New York State is actually, in my opinion, one of the best opportunities to do this. And you know, Russell and Noah, they see it too. And we'll get into that. And then where are we now? And what are we doing next? So this is CrannMor Forest Farm. And this is just after we planted back in June, probably. This is what it looked like. I hope you can all see this when we got onto the property last December. And it had been an overgrazed bison farm. Bison are hard to manage, so there's no rotational grazing there. And you can see that erosion gully. And then here, where they had the animals concentrated at the time, you know, we'd sink in up to our knees in the mud, and it was a bit of a mess. But it's a beautiful region, a beautiful area. And you can see the red line on the left, that's the erosion gully. And we went with Mark's method and used his water management framework and expertise, and we got in and we established the swales. And that will fix the erosion gully. This will spread the water out, allow it to infiltrate, and then right underneath that, where the water is being made available, we plant the trees so that they have the benefit of the water. And that's a one-time capital infusion and a capital improvement to manage the water on this landscape for a very long time. And then we plant hazelnuts in between the rows where it's appropriate, and we can pack them in. And then later, we're doing grazing. Mark talked about all the different potential options of what can be done and what he's done on his farm. We throw in bees at some point later. We can stack functions with agriculture, agroforestry, and that's the land equivalent ratio. How many enterprises can we stack in here? How many people want to join us? You know, how many people and resources can we bring into it? Let's find out. So what were in all those tree tubes that we planted there? Well, hazelnuts and chestnuts are our core crops, but we're enhancing ecosystems. We're reinstalling ecosystems. And we picked from the plant communities that are appropriate to here, that have a human benefit for nutrition or perhaps for our livestock. And we went and we're going for diversity. And not only is this plant diversity, this is structural diversity, which means there's more niches and homes for insects, birds, animals, and people. Let's get the people back out there. And so what could this mean for human health benefits just on this 150 acres of plants that we put in, trees and shrubs? Well, this was Abigail, one of our colleagues, was reading through Mark's book and was inspired by his bit on the potential for the nutrition from these systems and these farms. Well, this is at year 11, based just off the hazelnuts, chestnuts, and beef projections on what we put in on this farm. And so you look at the macronutrients, that's great. Oh, and all based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So on this 150 acres, we could feed 306 people every day for a year. A very nutrient-dense, packed diet. I mean, you look at the vitamins and minerals, like up over 100%, the fiber, that's well over the recommended allowance. I mean, we can do so much. Now, with the ecological benefits from this farm, you know, I spoke about the water cycling and what we do with Mark's model to get in there, the biodiversity. What could this mean for carbon? Well, we took a look at what we planted and the things that we're doing, and we went to the USDA Comet Planner and typed in what we're doing in the acreage. And based on their estimate, they project that this farm is going to sequester every year 1,068 tons of CO2 per year on the farm. That's a little over 7 tons per acre. You know, and I had only planned on 3, you know, so, but just for comparison, you know, using 2021 estimates for the common corn practices, this farm would be emitting 150 tons of carbon dioxide. Look what we can do. This is why agroforestry has been identified as one of the top solutions and tools in our toolkit. So what's the framework we've put around this? Well, long term, we're talking about engaging with ecosystems that can get put in place and yield and grow. We nurture them into being and let them go, and they grow and diversify over time. This is based off of a past project projections. These numbers are not going to be right. They're not going to be wrong. I mean, we'll see what they are. But they are, what we do capture is we're engaging and aligning ourselves with nature, following that model, and nature will build over time. We have to have the vision to raise our time horizons and look for the future. So we structure our farms as either a limited partnership or LLC, depending on the property and the investor profile. The farm LLC purchases the land to fit our model. And we target a return of all capital contributions to investing partners by year 10. At that point, we have an employee profit share program and our sponsor carry that would kick in. And we target an investor return of 9 to 12% a year 15. And these estimates are based off of the chestnut and hazelnut enterprises. We do intend to pursue things like carbon credits. It's one of the reasons we're doing this, is so we can do that. We're going to be doing grazing, but it is agriculture. Nothing's guaranteed. And so we kept things to chestnuts and hazelnuts. We think this, executing on the vision and the roadmap that we have in place, we can shift over 50,000 acres in New York State. The bit that we've highlighted there probably represents 3.5, 4 million acres in New York State. As Russell said, there is plenty of it out there that's appropriate. We have to put a framework around it. If we're going to re-envision a whole system, we have to build out the pieces, not only for us and our projects to really capitalize and bring them in, but to bring in other people. And so when we started, we had this big vision in mind, and we went back and said, our goal is to get 400 acres established, and that would be the base to build off of. Well, as of this spring, we did that. We have that 400 acres in the ground. And so when you look at the base there, our idea was to be the base to get the initial bits of these other things going. Now, Mark started his nursery a long time ago. He's been doing the plant breeding, and we're working off of that. But then we will need the processing. We need the aggregation. Tianna has been working at that, in her way. And we need to partner and get these things done together. And then at some point, we have to package this all together, aggregate it, and bring it to people. We can't do all this by ourselves. And this bottom part, this is not just CrannMor. This is Breadtree. This is the New York Tree Crop Alliance, and a lot of people that we don't know yet. We need more people. And so we need to establish this whole vision and establish the enabling enterprises, the nursery, the nut processing plants, the value-added product consumer brand that we can layer over top of this and provide nutrient-dense food to people and give them a way to participate. I think people are going to love this story. And the best way to catalyze all this is to put this whole system in place and give people this network of allied farms, because we can't do it alone and we need a lot more people. And let's design it so that we have everybody sharing in the economics. And then we bring in new farmers and we attract them. We don't try to beat them over the head. We attract them by what we're doing and what's possible. And so where we are now, we have 6 farms in our network, over 400 acres planted. We've planted 200,000 some trees and shrubs. We have forest agriculture nursery. We have the expertise. We're based on, Mark has attracted a lot of people to himself with his work and his vision over the years. And we are working with that network. And part of our idea is to have these experts, these people who've actually been living it, doing this, and bring people in to learn alongside them, learn alongside Mark, alongside Johan, and get them access to farms to work within a supportive system so they can learn and get onto new farms. So what's next? We're looking to continue to scale out our vision. Oh, how do I get this one back? What's that? Sneak peek. Sneak peek. Oh, there we go. Look. Okay. We are raising capital for CrannMor Forest Farm 2. We're raising $6.5 million to acquire and establish 400 acres of regenerative agroforestry systems here in New York State, here in the greater New York City food shed. We have $150 million pledged to date. One farm representing roughly $3 million.
I think it's 1.5 million, not 150 million.
Oh, but we're open to 150 million. Yeah, we are. That's where we have to get to. And yes, 1.5 million. I'm ahead of myself. And one farm representing about $3 million of this is expected to close soon. And then the remaining funds will be used to aggressively source, secure, and develop promising properties that come up and meet our specific criteria. And some of the farms come up and then they go, and we can't always be scrambling to get there. We need partners to help us find this. The more planning we can do, the more options at our disposal. We can do a lot together. Very excited to see all of you come out here tonight for this, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you. Here's my contact information, my email, my cell phone. Please reach out. We'd love to have you come up, visit the farms. We'd love to share more information. I could talk for hours about this, or we could, But anyways, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And thanks again, Will and Mike. It's a wonderful opportunity.